Hi, I'm Paul Pasolka, Ivy Masters Learning Center and IvyMasters.com. And today we're going to look at Test 1, Section 1, Number 2, which reads, which choice best describes the developmental pattern of the passage? So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to start with the correct answer. I'm going to explain to you why it's correct. We're going to look for the support in the passage, but then also we're going to see why the wrong answer is wrong. I advise you to stick around to see why your wrong answer is wrong as well. Correct answer is a detailed depiction of a meaningful encounter. Where do we see it? Well, the encounter begins in line 5 to 6. He pounded on the door while the cold rain beat on the shuttered veranda. So he's arriving. And then what we get in 17, she picked the name card off the maid's lacquer tray. Shinoda Akira, Kobe Dental College, she read. Naomi recognized the name. Chi heard a soft intake of air. So Chi's like, and then she's like, I think you should go. So she's talking to her mom. I think you should go see what Chi has to say, or see what Kira has to say here. And then in line 59 down here, what we get is, I come to ask for Naomi's hand, which begs the question, why doesn't he ask for Naomi's foot? Well, yes, of course, he's asking for her hand in marriage. So, sounds like it's a meaningful encounter. You see all the detail you get here, pounded on the door while the cold rain beat on the shuttered veranda. You got a lot of descriptors in there, adjectives, and that turns out to be your correct answer. Now, why not answer choice A, a careful analysis of a traditional practice? Well, we see in the beginning what that traditional practice is. Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked his mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between, would she have been more receptive? So it sounds like in 1920s Japan, which you would have read in the beginning, that was common practice. You would say, hey mom, I want to marry this girl Naomi. And mom would say, hey, Akira wants to marry this girl Naomi. And then Akira's dad would go to a go-between, a mediator of sorts, and say, hey Chi, our son, or Akira, the son of these two, want to marry your daughter Naomi. And so the problem is the rest of the passage does not go on to describe in any detail that traditional passage. It's only introduced in the beginning as a flashback. You can see the regret, Akira's regret in the first passage. It sounds like maybe she gave him the Heisman and said, sorry, you can't marry my daughter, because he's wondering what would happen if he had posed this question more traditionally accepted, which would be accepted by the society. Okay, let's see why it's not. Answer choice C, a definitive response to a series of questions. Let's see what kind of questions we get in this passage. So, scrolling up, we get in 41 to 45. So we need some context here. I've an opportunity to go to America as a dentist for Seattle's Japanese community. Congratulations, she said with amusement. That is an opportunity, I'm sure, but how am I involved? So there the question is posed. She is asking how she's involved. And then Akira in line 59 drops the bomb. I've come to ask for Naomi's hand because I want to marry your daughter. And what's implied there is maybe he's going to take her with him. At this point, that's what you might be thinking. You'd have to read on. So, and then in 61, we get, so does he answer that question? Yes, he does. I've come to ask for Naomi's hand. That's why it's of interest to Chi. And then Chi asks, does Naomi know anything of your ambitions? So, does Naomi know you want to marry her? And Akira answers, we have an understanding. So it looks like that question is answered as well. So what's not answered here if that's the wrong answer? Well, Chi it doesn't look good for Akira over here. In the end, so first of all, we never get an answer to whether or not, and it's not a direct question. He says, I've come to ask for Naomi's hand, But she never gives him an answer. He just says, she's not like, welcome to the family. She's like, does Naomi know anything of your ambition? So it sounds like it's not going well for Akira. And then we don't really get an answer to that indirect question. What else don't we get an answer to? Well, Naomi says, he has asked you. And it sounds like based on Chi's response, she doesn't answer directly, but sounds like he has asked. And Chi says, where'd you meet such a fellow? Imagine. He thinks he can marry the Fuji heir and take her into America all in the snaps of her fingers. And then she does answer him. I met him at a literary meeting, but you know that question was rhetorical. Didn't need an answer. It's like basically another way of saying, where'd you get this guy? And then and then it pretty much ends, but we really don't get a definitive response to a series of questions. That's really not the developmental pattern in the passage. That's not what the passage is focused or centered on, even though maybe most of those questions are answered. Answer choice D, cheerful recounting of an amusing anecdote. So if we look in lines 61 to 62, does Naomi know anything of your ambitions? So it sounds like Akira is not cheerful because he doesn't get quite the warm, welcoming response that he would like. And an amusing anecdote, by the way, an anecdote is a short story, usually funny or interesting, often personal. And it's not like an anecdote, like if this is the anecdote, we don't get the cheerful response at the end. And we'll look down further, 84 to 85. Based on Chi's response, she doesn't sound like she's cheerful. Where'd you meet such a fellow? Imagine he think that he can marry the Fuji heir, blah, 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 blah. Take her to America and snap her fingers. Yeah, doesn't sound like she's so amused. And then in line 95, even though Chi's reaction's like, yeah, where'd you get this guy? Naomi responds with, I mean to have him. So Naomi is probably very upset about her mother's response. She wants to marry this guy, and Mama's like, this guy's crazy. Wants to marry you? Forget about it. Anyway, thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, click like. You could share it with someone who has trouble with these big picture questions or literature. If there's any question you'd like to see answered from any official PSAT or SAT or ACT, leave that in the comments and click subscribe so you don't miss anything. Have a great day.